The lab that you're going to work on today deals with the cell membrane and its characteristic of being semi-permeable. We're going to use a Ziploc bag to represent a cell membrane, and we're going to look at the molecules of iodine and starch and glucose to see which of those can pass through the membrane. If you remember, there are several factors that influence permeability: the concentration of the solution, the electrical charge of the molecules, the shape of the molecules, and then certainly the size of the molecules. And that's the factor that we're going to be considering today. Which molecules are small enough to pass through the holes in the Ziploc bag, the pores in the Ziploc bag, and enter into that beaker of water. So the lab goes like this. You're going to take a Ziploc bag and pour some starch into it. You're going to pour some glucose into it. Seal it up, and then you're going to place it in a beaker of water that you've added some Lugol's iodine to. Now, if you remember, in Chapter 2, you did a virtual lab that dealt with Lugol's iodine. You added it to some starch, and you saw a color change that indicated the starch was present. We used Lugol's iodine again when we stained the potato pieces during the microscope lab. The leucoplasts stained that purple-black, and you could see the starch inside of them. So one of the things you're going to look for today is, does the iodine move into the bag? Does the starch move out of the bag? And you're going to be looking and using that blue-black color change as an indicator of the movement of those molecules. So how do we test and figure out if the sugar, if the glucose is moving across the membrane? Well, we're going to use what's called Benedict's solution, and you used it in the virtual lab from Chapter 2. So after we've let the beaker sit for a while, you're going to take a little bit of that solution from the test tube, from the beaker, and pour it into a test tube and add some Benedict solution to it. It'll be blue, and then what will happen next is you're going to put it in a hot water bath, and the heat will activate the change if there's glucose present. And you'll see it go from a blue to an orange color if there's glucose that moves through the bag into the beaker water. We've had varying results. The lab requires that you pay attention to detail. When it asks you to wash off the Ziploc bag, it's important that you do that. When it asks you to blot it dry, you need to follow that instruction. Weigh it before you put it into the beaker of water. Weigh it again afterwards. We also want to talk about the water. Does the water move through the membrane in and out of the Ziploc bag? You're going to need to wear safety glasses. You're going to need to pay particular attention because the hot plate is on. There's a hot water bath that is sitting on it that we need to use for that Benedict's test. Please make sure when you're finished with the lab that you clean your area up so that it looks the same as it did when you arrived. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Berger and let her finish walking you through the instructions. Pay attention to her instructions. Do as she asks. Have a good time, but this is serious business.